Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to yet another Grand Prix weekend in 2024, and it is the return to Singapore for the 17th, I believe, race weekend of the year. Not many races to go, but I guarantee you there are still plenty of memorable and exciting moments left in this 2024 season, which really has turned into something quite special. And here in Singapore, of course, it is a street circuit. It is very tight. The circuit, it is, even though the track, certain alterations towards the final sector, were made last year, and it is easier to follow another car. It is still very, very, very hard to overtake with these cars, given how wide these cars are and just how tricky this circuit is just driving on your own. But yeah, this circuit has a lot of similarities to, I would say, Monaco in terms of qualifying being so important. And that is why this weekend I'm only doing a watch along for qualifying as opposed to both qualifying and the race, because this is really where, in terms of who comes out on top this weekend, this is really where it's decided, most likely, unless something quite incredible happens tomorrow. We've seen incredible things happen in the race that caused the pole position, person to not end up taking the race win. But normally, if you take pole here, unless something goes drastically wrong, then you will end up taking the race win. It is also a brilliant track when it comes to qualifying, because it really does test the drivers. You really get to see who is the absolute elite of the elite around a track like this, because it really does show who some of the most special drivers are on the grid. And we will find that out today. Of course, how good your car is does matter a lot, but yeah, still we'll get some top performances from the elite drivers. I have no doubt about that. And yeah, so far this weekend, it's looked pretty competitive, the field. I still have my favourites in terms of who I think will, end up on pole, who I think will do well in general this weekend, but it is looking still very competitive. And the front of the midfield looking very strong as well. So this qualifying session is going to be exciting, no doubt about it. Not just in terms of, who takes pole position, but really outside of that, if you look outside of the top three of the grid, it's going to be all over the place in terms of who ends up in what position. And I'd be very surprised if you had, two drivers of the same team, say, on the same row of the grid, outside again of the top three, top four on the grid here, because of just how insanely close it is between certain teams and certain drivers. But yeah, this is going to be, as it usually is in Singapore, qualifying day is going to be very, very exciting. And I cannot wait for it. And as you can see, it is only an hour and 25 minutes away, which sounds a lot, but as we go along, it will fly by. But I hope you guys are doing well. Of course, the last Grand Prix of Baku, what a Grand Prix weekend that was. Great to see you again after that Grand Prix. And of course, this is the last race before another long break. After this weekend's race, there won't be another F1 race for a month until we come to, what will it be, the United States Grand Prix in Austin. And then once we get to that race, we'll have races thick and fast on the calendar again. But yeah, this is the last race for quite a while. And let's hope we, I wouldn't say go out with a bang, but let's hope we have another, like we had in Baku, another really great race weekend. And I'm sure it will be. At least, again, when it comes to qualifying, because qualifying here is always exciting. But yeah, hope you guys are well. No matter what time zone you're in, part of the world you're from, hope you're all having as best a time as possible. And I hope you can join me today in enjoying and watching along qualifying in Singapore. And of course, What we're going to be doing in this qualifying watch along is the usual stuff, the build up to qualifying, which will be going through the results of practice 2 yesterday, which is really the only representative session of the weekend so far, because of course practice 1 and practice 3 take place in daylight, so you can't really pay really any attention to those sessions in terms of, the lap times and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll look at the practice 2 results just to see who is doing well this weekend, who looks quick, who doesn't look quick. Then we'll get into the sector time data to understand that data a bit better. And then, of course, I will get into how I think things will play out in qualifying with my qualifying predictions. And then we'll get into some other stuff as well before qualifying. Then, obviously, once we get to qualifying, I'll take you through the session. And then instead of last week where I couldn't do a reaction because I had something to go to right after the session, today I will do a bit of a reaction after qualifying, of course. So yeah, that's the plan for today. And of course, another quick thing is that, of course, there is a poll running as usual in the live chat. And I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole position in Singapore? Will it be Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, or Carlos Sainz? Who out of either the 2 McLaren drivers or 2 Ferrari drivers do you think will take pole position? For me, those are the only, or the 4 most likely drivers to get pole here. We'll get into more so why I think that very, very soon. But yeah, there's the poll in the chat, and you have what, an hour and a half, or not an hour and a half, about an hour and 45 or so to make your decision as to who you think will take pole position. Of course, you do have the advantage of watching Q1 and Q2 before making your decision if you want to wait that long. But let's now go on to what happened yesterday and get an understanding of just where the pace is at this weekend and who is, setting the pace here in Singapore. So here are the results of practice 2. Lando Norris ended up quickest, but by only half a tenth from Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. And Ferrari looking very, very quick. And I think we have, looking at practice 2 and just watching the Ferrari car on track this weekend, I think we have enough evidence to say absolutely that upgrade that they brought to Monza 3 weeks ago, which was, a new floor, I think maybe a new diffuser as well. Their last big upgrade of the season, I think it's safe to say that upgrade has definitely worked, because if it didn't, they wouldn't be this close in practice. No way. Carlos Sainz, though, quite far behind, which is a bit alarming. I mean, in practice 1, he was a bit closer to his teammates, so I don't think it's, something to worry about massively if you're a Carlos Sainz fan, but he's definitely looking slower than his teammate, but I'm sure he can, close that gap down quite a bit when we actually get to qualifying. But Ferrari overall looking very fast here in Singapore. And then Yuki Tsunoda, 4th for Racing Bulls. And to prove that Racing Bulls are legitimately quick, you got Daniel Ricciardo just 0.010 of a second slower than Tsunoda back in 6th place. So both Racing Bulls were in the top 10 in practice 1 as well. I know, yeah, practice 1, you shouldn't look too much into the lap times, but in comparison to everyone else in a session that, doesn't matter much, they were still looking decent is, the point I'm trying to make. So yeah, Racing Bulls, they are maybe the dark horse of this weekend, but definitely a team to watch out for because they have looked very good so far. And when we get into the sector time data, you'll see exactly why they've been so good. Oscar Piastri then in 5th place, and Piastri, who of course has been brilliant as of late, 3/4 of a second off of the pace of his teammate. Now, that is alarming. And you may say, well, surely, the amount of lap time that Sainz is losing to Leclerc, his teammate, is bad. So why didn't you, say that was as alarming? But with Piastri, he was also miles off the pace of Lando in practice 1 and in practice 3, which finished about an hour ago. Piastri was about the same distance back from his teammates. So clearly, Lando is miles quicker than Oscar this weekend, at least in qualifying trim around this track. So, in terms of Oscar Piastri and what he's capable of this weekend, unless Lando Norris and maybe Charles Leclerc as well, unless they have a really poor Q3, I don't see how Oscar can possibly get on pole position, because he just doesn't fundamentally this weekend have the speed over a single lap. Of course, when it comes to the race, that's a completely different matter. And of course, it depends on where he's going to be starting the race from. Obviously, what position he's in at the end of the first lap and all of that. But given the pace he's showing at the moment, I'd be very surprised if Piastri is on the front row after qualifying today. I'd be very surprised, because he's been consistently miles off his teammate. And it's not because Lando has a new upgrade on his car and Oscar doesn't. It's nothing to do with that. I think the only explanation is that Oscar, last year, of course, he did race here, but he wasn't as quick, obviously, as his teammate. The only explanation is that Oscar this just isn't one of his good tracks. And I know, to be an elite driver, you can't really have that where, you have certain weekends where you're not on the pace because it's not a track you like particularly. I know, that's a thing you can't have very often, but I think for Piastri, I think that's what it is. I think he just doesn't like this circuit as much as others. So, yeah, I think that's the explanation there. But even though he is miles off the pace of his teammate, given how good the car is, I think he should still be aiming high, for a top 3 minimum this weekend for, say, qualifying and the race. But, yeah, we'll see how Piastri gets on in qualifying. And then you got Mercedes just behind the Racing Bulls. Mercedes were not very happy after yesterday. I do think, though, they were not overblowing how far off the pace they are, but I do think that they were overreacting just a tad. Because, yeah, they're not anywhere near the pace of, McLaren and Ferrari. That is clear to see. But they're not, they're not at the point where they are going to be struggling to make Q3 with any of their cars. Maybe with Lewis Hamilton, they'll struggle to make Q3. But with George Russell, who clearly is the quickest Mercedes driver this weekend, which is no surprise, because normally he is the quickest Mercedes driver. I still think with Russell, I think, they still have a very good chance of being on the third row of the grid. So I think Mercedes, again, I think they were just slightly going over the top in terms of, how maybe bad practice was for them yesterday. And there's Sergio Perez 8th in the Red Bull, 8, nearly 9 tenths of a second away from Lando Norris. Max Verstappen, as you'll see later, ended up in P15. Now, we know Verstappen, when he's on it properly, he will be quicker than Perez around this track. Despite that, though, even if you factor that in, Red Bull still wouldn't be anywhere near McLaren or Ferrari. And going into qualifying, I think that is still the case. Even though Max Verstappen, after practice 3, did say on team radio that the car felt a lot better than it did on Friday, which is positive to hear from, their point of view. But Red Bull and Mercedes, it's clear to see from what we saw in practice 2, and really from what has been seen all weekend, those two teams are just not on the same level as McLaren and Ferrari. McLaren and Ferrari are, without doubt, the two quickest teams this weekend. And you could argue, to be honest, that at the moment, in general, McLaren and Ferrari are the two quickest teams in Formula One. Because, of course, Baku last weekend, they were both right up there. And the same, at Monza as well. So, yeah, it's not really, I guess the pecking order we're seeing here is not massively different from what we were expecting. McLaren to be on the top and Ferrari to not be that far behind. And then Red Bull and Mercedes to be clearly behind. Again, not really a surprise given what we've seen as of late from those front four teams. And then Alex Albon, ninth to the Williams. Not really a surprise Williams in there, because they've been one of the most, if not the most in-form midfield teams since we came back from the summer break. Also, they brought a big upgrade a few weeks ago, which is the reason their form has been so good, and that's why Albon will be right in the hunt for a Q3 appearance, because that Williams car genuinely is a very strong midfield car right now. And then you got Nico Hülkenberg P10 and the Haas car looking decent, but I wouldn't say, even though it was in the top 10 in practice, I don't think the Haas car is a top 10 runner realistically for this weekend. And then the rest of the field, Lewis Hamilton in 11th, once again struggling like mad is Hamilton. Alonso 12th, Aston Martin, poor pace so far this weekend. We'll get into more so why that is later on. Magnussen, obviously back from his ban, ready to cause more havoc. And I'm sure he will on Sunday. But yeah, Magnussen 13th. And I have to say, pretty good pace from him, considering that he had a week off. Well, not a week off, but one race off. Coming in Singapore and being right on the pace, basically, of teammate Hülkenberg. Lance Stroll 14th, Max Verstappen 15th. Again, Verstappen we know will be a lot quicker than this, but Red Bull still, like I said, they're not going to be on the pace of McLaren and Ferrari. There's absolutely no chance of that, I don't think, in qualifying. I'd be amazed if, say, Max could get ahead of any of those McLaren or Ferrari cars in qualifying. Franco Colapinto 16th. A bit more of a struggle for him yesterday, but in practice 3, I think he was a bit more competitive with his teammates. So, yeah, Colapinto still doing decent, I would say. We have to remember, though, with Colapinto, I think it's the first ever time he's raced here in Singapore. So, might be a factor in him maybe not being as good as he was in Baku last week. Ocon 17th, Gasly 18th. I am really surprised Alpine are this slow. I thought they'd be pretty quick at a track like this. And be in the hunt, maybe to get a car into Q3. Maybe they will later on. Maybe they've been sandbagging, in qualifying. But they haven't shown anything so far for us to get, excited about, let's say. What do you call it? Sauber at the very back. Sorry for the stutter there. I've just seen that Chelsea have gone up 2-0 in just over 15 minutes. Thankfully, my team looking good again for the first time in 2 or 3 years. Sauber, as usual, at the very back, and an absolute load of shit, but, not really a surprise, is it? But let's go on to the sector time data, just to understand why it ended up the way it did. And Ferrari in the first sector, the quickest, not really a surprise. Remember, in the first sector, you do have 2 DRS zones, which will help Ferrari over McLaren. So that's why Ferrari, quickest in the first sector. Of course, their straight line speed still very, very good. McLaren just behind, and then you got Mercedes third best, which, to be honest, I think Mercedes' first sector pace there is as good as it really should be. I don't think you can really complain about this sector time from, from Mercedes-Benz. Racing Bulls right behind them. Good to see Aston Martin's first sector, I'd say, about as good as it should be. Haas maybe could be a tad better, say half a tenth better. Red Bull, though, definitely should be stronger in this first sector. They should be a tenth and a half minimum quicker than how quick they were in the first sector. There's no reason for them to be, that far off in just the first sector, when the first sector is relatively simple compared to, the rest of the lap. So yeah, there's no reason for Red Bull to be that slow. Williams, a bit surprising that they're that far back in the first sector, but you'll see in a moment that they are pretty quick in the other parts of the track. Alpine, 4/10 off in the first sector. Really, I don't know if that's because the Renault engine is just that bad, but yeah, that is a quite poor first sector, and the same goes for Sauber. But the middle sector is where you get to see, really, in terms of downforce, what teams are really going well, in the high downforce parts of the track here in Singapore. And no surprise, Ferrari and McLaren at the top. The only surprise maybe at the top is that Ferrari slightly ahead of McLaren. I will say, though, and I know in Baku you could say technically this was wrong, but I think Red Bull's poor Q3 performance a week ago in Baku did help this happening. But normally, Ferrari are not as quick in qualifying as they tend to be in practice on a Friday. So I don't think Ferrari are going to be necessarily the quickest team in the middle sector and, in qualifying. But it is still a tad surprising they were just this quick, Ferrari, in the middle sector, given that, McLaren, the expectation was that they, in this part of the track, would be really the kings compared to everybody else. And it really does show you that with that upgrade Ferrari brought 3 weeks ago, just how much they've improved. They've gone, back to being as quick as they were probably a couple years ago, where they were regularly fighting for pole and fighting for, race victories. So great to see, honestly, from Ferrari. We haven't seen it for a while, an upgrade really work for them until now. And when it does work for them, we get to see Ferrari more so where they should be. And absolutely where they are at the moment, in terms of how competitive they are, is at minimum how good they should be. So yeah, great to see for the Scuderia. Mercedes, third best in this middle sector. You might be expecting me to say, they should be like a tenth or so better, but honestly, I don't think they should. And the reason I say that is because Mercedes, obviously, they brought a couple big upgrades back in, what was it, like June and that took them from being far off the pace to being competitive with the other three teams, McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull. But since, say, July, where they were really competitive, they've not really improved with upgrades since then. And I think they've even admitted that they have fallen a bit behind those teams because they just haven't developed as well. And I think what you're seeing here with the middle sector time is a result of that. If they maybe had brought into this weekend, a big upgrade package, maybe they would be right on the pace of Ferrari and McLaren. But again, that lack of development, that's what you're seeing right there. That's why they are pretty much 0.2 of a second off the pace of Ferrari and McLaren. That's the difference between those teams. Mercedes, if they're going to win any more races this year, they need to bring, if they've got any more upgrades in the pipeline, they need to bring a whole host of them pretty quickly, because at this rate, I can see them getting maybe a couple podiums here and there, but I don't think race wins are really possible anymore for Mercedes-Benz because they're just not quick enough right now. Racing Bulls, I have to say, with Racing Bulls, it is very surprising just how competitive they've been this weekend and how very strong they are in the middle sector. Because if we look at the last few races we've had, they've not really been that strong, and they've actually been stronger at tracks with, a lot of straight lines. Obviously, Spa was one, Monza, they were decent, even Baku, they looked decent at times in, I think, qualifying. So, again, it is quite a surprise that they've come here and suddenly look like a really strong midfield team when they've not really been that for for quite a few races. So yeah, it is quite a surprise. And even Helmut Marko was baffled by not just Racing Bulls being quicker than Red Bull in practice yesterday, but Racing Bulls in general being as quick as they were. It's not really something they saw coming. And it's not something I saw coming. I thought Racing Bulls would really struggle, to be honest, to get in the top 10. But they've been pretty comfortably doing it this weekend. And we'll see, of course, in qualifying, how well they'll go. But yeah, it is quite surprising just how strong they have been. And then you've got, a tenth and a bit back. You've got Williams, again, showing just how much they've improved. The downforce of that car with that upgrade a few weeks ago. That's why they were so quick in the corners in Baku. And that's why they're looking, competitive here, because the car through the corners is just so much better than it was before the summer break came. Haas, their pace is decent. And then we get to Red Bull, 4.5 tenths off of Ferrari in the middle sector. And that's really why Red Bull was just so poor yesterday, was because of this middle sector. There is no excuse for them to be that far off. They should be, 3 tenths of a second at least, maybe even 4 tenths of a second at least, quicker in this part of the track. There's no reason for them to be that far off. But they just don't have the grip that Ferrari and McLaren do. That's the reality of the situation. And also, I mean, if we look back to Baku, even though Max, had his struggles in the race, Sergio Perez was right in there fighting. He was on the podium, or in the podium positions for a long time, almost the entire race, and was technically fighting for the race win as well with Sergio Perez. Red Bull, if you actually look at it, they did actually have good pace in Baku. In qualifying, they did until Q3, where suddenly both drivers just couldn't set a good lap. And then the race, again, Perez had good pace, had, maybe you could say, race-winning pace, but then obviously couldn't utilize it because of Leclerc, Piastri ahead, and then obviously Carlos Sainz overtook Perez at the end, and then obviously we know what happened after that with the accident. So, yeah, Red Bull, a week ago in Baku, they were actually competitive, and the point I'm trying to make is obviously in Baku, they started the weekend very strong. And I said this in Baku, and I've always really said this for the last couple years, that Red Bull, how competitive they are going to be in a race weekend depends on how well they start the weekend. If they start poorly, like they have this weekend, then they're not going to be, fighting for pole or fighting even probably for the race win. But in Baku, they started the weekend that well that they were legitimate contenders, not only for pole, but for the race win, but obviously didn't execute it because of a multitude of reasons. So that's what it comes down to Red Bull, I think, with them, is obviously they've got an upgrade, I think, coming at the next Grand Prix in Austin in 4 weeks' time. Of course, that upgrade has to work for them. And if it does, maybe that makes the difference in, Max Verstappen winning, his fourth world championship. But I think with Red Bull, what really matters for them is the setup of the car. I think, when they come to a race weekend and if they start well and the setup feels good, then they're fine. Their car still has plenty of pace. But if they get to a race weekend and they don't start well because the setup is, all over the place and the car doesn't feel good, they're always then on the back foot and they just never seem to recover enough to actually get like a great result. So again, their issues, Red Bull, I think mainly, I don't think it's, obviously upgrades this season haven't worked for them so far, which is, been a big issue. But I think their main issues are setup related. I think, again, when they get the setup right, I think that car is still fundamentally a very quick car. But when the setup isn't right, the car is dreadful. And I know that might seem obvious for, that should be the way it is. When obviously you don't get the setup right, the car obviously is not going to be as good. But with Red Bull, it feels that their car is a lot more sensitive to, maybe slight alterations in, setup and that. So that's, I think that's where their issues mainly lie. And again, we'll see going forward whether they can improve on this. But I think, again, what we saw back in Baku was that car, that Red Bull car, fundamentally, it's still good. They just need to find, at any given race weekend left, they just need to try and find that sweet spot with the setup. And if they can, early on in a race weekend, then they should be fine. But a lot of these past few races, they haven't been able to do that. They've been really struggling when it comes to that. That's why Max Verstappen has been complaining as much as he has about the car feeling like shit, because again, the setup just has been all over the place. But I have to say as well, Aston Martin, really poor middle sector. They really should be the best midfield team through this middle sector and be really, given how good Racing Bulls are, look at this middle sector, they should be right there with Racing Bulls and and Mercedes-Benz. And that would be a gain of what? Like 0.3 of a second, pretty much. And if, they were 0.3 of a second quicker, Alonso would be a shoo-in to make Q3. Alonso still might make Q3. Obviously, Alonso's very quick around this track. This has always been a track of his where he's been phenomenally quick. But I'm sorry, that Aston Martin car has got to be more competitive than that, especially in this part of the track. Alpine as well. They've got to be stronger in this part of the track where, there isn't really any excuses in terms of them being off the pace. And then the final sector is pretty simple, to be honest. You've got a lot more flat out sections in the final sector. There's still a couple tricky corners, but it is a lot faster, the final sector. And McLaren, not really a surprise, because in the higher speed corners, their car is, well, the best in Formula One. There is no doubt about that. McLaren, quickest, but only just from Ferrari, who also, we have to say, in high-speed corners have a very good car now. And then a massive drop-off to Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, a 1/4 of a second back. Red Bull, I would say overall for the lap, are missing, at least half a second that they should be finding, really. But even if they find that, that's still not enough to put them on the pace of McLaren or Ferrari, unfortunately, because they still are fundamentally slower right now. Williams, very strong in the final sector. There you go. See Franco Colapinto, the quickest of the Williams drivers in the final sector. Racing Bull still pretty competitive as well. Haas still in there. Alpine a bit more competitive. Mercedes, though, that's really where Mercedes, at least with Russell, were, in the end, were struggling with their position, was because they were just so slow, so far off the pace in the final sector where they should have been probably, 2.5, 3 tenths quicker than they were. And if they were, then Russell would have ended up probably fourth in practice too, and he would have been definitely more satisfied, let's say, with where Mercedes were. But again, Mercedes and Red Bull, they're not as bad as it might seem, because Mercedes and Red Bull always improve compared to what they do on a Friday. They always tend to sandbag a bit more on a Friday than McLaren and Ferrari do, but they are definitely not, as I said earlier, on the pace of McLaren and Ferrari. Mercedes and Red Bull, they have got their own battle, but it definitely isn't for, say, the podium positions. Absolutely no way. But as well, Aston Martin, nowhere near good enough from them either, being one of the slowest teams in the final sector when they should be really where Racing Bulls and Williams are. So again, Aston Martin nowhere near good enough. But if we go back to the top 10 from practice 2, I think before we go into my predictions, let's just go through what I think the pecking order for qualifying is, because I just need to clarify that before I obviously go on to explain my predictions for this qualifying session, which, by the way, is coming up, of course, in just under an hour's time, in about, 53 minutes from now, something like that. But yeah, McLaren, I do think, have the best car. I think when it comes down to it, McLaren will have probably a couple tenths of a second in their in their hands over Ferrari. I just don't think Ferrari have enough to be better than McLaren, because I think McLaren vitally in the middle and final sector are just too quick. And I think Ferrari, again, as I said earlier, most times tend to be not as quick in qualifying as they are on a Friday. So, yeah, that's why I think McLaren do have, for qualifying, the quickest car. Ferrari, though, definitely second, and definitely in the fight for pole, but definitely second best out of those two teams. And then third best team, I think, will be Red Bull, because Max, as he said earlier in practice 3, the car for him feels better. And I think Red Bull definitely will be a lot better than they were in practice yesterday. Red Bull are not going to be 8th and 15th. I can guarantee you that now. So, yeah, I think Red Bull will be just slightly quicker than Mercedes. So I'll go, McLaren quickest, Ferrari second, Red Bull third, Mercedes fourth, Racing Bulls without a doubt fifth. They are definitely the quickest midfield team. Sixth best, I would probably go for Williams. And then seventh, I would go Haas. Eighth, I would go Aston Martin. But I do get a feeling that Aston Martin could be a lot stronger today, so watch out for them. And then 9th, Alpine, and 10th, obviously, Sauber. That's what I think the pecking order is for qualifying today. And based on that, let's get into my qualifying prediction. And, of course, predicted gaps on the right-hand side. And Lando Norris, I think, will take pole position in Singapore for the first time in his career, and will be a couple tenths of a second ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Third, I'm going Oscar Piastri, just ahead of Carlos Sainz. That fight there between Piastri and Sainz is going to be very, very close. But I think Piastri just about gets ahead in that fight. And then Max Verstappen, I think, will be fifth and 6 tenths of a second off the pace of McLaren. And Max will be barely ahead of the Mercedes of Russell. Like I said, Red Bull and Mercedes will be very close together today on performance between at least the two best drivers from those two teams. 7th, Sergio Perez, and just behind Perez, I think, will be the two racing bulls of Tsunoda and Ricciardo. And just about finishing in 10th, I think, will be Lewis Hamilton. But I would not be surprised if Hamilton did not make Q3, given how quick, Albon looks. And of course, if Aston Martin are a bit stronger today, you've got Fernando Alonso there, who is a demon, really, around this track. So that's my prediction for qualifying, guys. Let me know your prediction for the session coming up soon in the live chat. And of course, I will get to your comments in a moment and read them out for a few minutes. Before I do, though, just quickly want to update you guys about car upgrades, because we have had a couple this weekend. Ferrari have got a new front wing, but it's not what you think. It's only revised elements of the front wing, so it's only a small upgrade. If it does work, though, it could be worth maybe an extra 10th of a second at most, but it's not going to make much of a difference for them. Alpine have got a new rear wing, and I think a reprofiled rear wing. We haven't seen any gain from that. And then Williams have got a new front suspension. We'll see if there's any further gain from that. But yeah, they look pretty quick as it is. But those are the only upgrades for this weekend. Let me just quickly get the timer back on the screen. And I believe that's correct. I believe we have 48 minutes to go until qualifying begins in Singapore. So yeah, make sure to get your comments in. What are your thoughts going into the session? Who do you think will get pole? Who do you think we need to look out for? And yeah, just give me your general comments going into qualifying, and I'll go through them for the next, say, half an hour, and then we'll get into a final couple things before, of course, getting into the session. But before I get onto your comments, as usual, quick plug, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because we've got plenty of qualifying and race watch-alongs coming up between now and the end of the season, and plenty of content in general. And make sure as well, if you have not already, smash that like button, please, because, of course, it does help the channel and the algorithm. And if you do actually enjoy the content, make sure to smash the like button, because it helps show me that you guys actually enjoy the content. And, keeps me obviously doing it. And also, I have to say, great to see so many people here, as usual. But yeah, I'll make sure to go through your comments in a moment. Great to see so many of them in the chat. Yeah, I just wanted to say quick channel update, because of course, as I said earlier, after this Grand Prix weekend, there is a 4-week break until the next race in Austin, which is a month from now. And I mean, that 4-week break, it will go by pretty quickly, especially for me, as I'm starting university for the 3rd year next week, starting my BA honours degree next week. So can't wait for that. So I'll be pretty busy. But yeah, I just want to give an update in terms of content for, say, between now and, say, when we get to the US Grand Prix in Austin. So obviously, I'm doing this qualifying watch-along today. As I've already said, there will not be a race watch-along tomorrow. Reason is because, as I've said before, I can't do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix anymore. I have increased the amount I'm going to do, because obviously we've got a championship battle on our hands, so I will be doing still plenty of race watch-alongs and that. But, what do you call it? Yeah, I won't be doing, a race watch-along for this Grand Prix. As well, mainly because the Singapore Grand Prix race doesn't tend to be that exciting most of the time. I know last year was exciting, but I think that was a bit more of a blip, to be honest, for what you normally get in Singapore. And I'd be very surprised if we got something as exciting tomorrow. Let's hope we do, but I'd be very surprised. So yeah, obviously doing this qualifying watch along, and then tomorrow there won't be a race watch along. On Monday though, I will be doing a podcast, of course, reviewing the Singapore Grand Prix, and then obviously the 4-week break will begin. Now, in terms of videos, there is one video that I am going to do, definitely going to do, and upload during that 4-week break. I've already got the idea for the video. It's based on, or the idea is, something that's happening right now. So it'll be, a current topic, and I think a topic that you guys will be very much interested in. That video will probably be uploaded, not next week, but the week after. So probably the first, maybe few days of October, say right before the first weekend of October. The first weekend of October is the 5th and the 6th. So hopefully maybe just before that, I can upload that video. That's the aim. If not, then it'll be the week after that. But yeah, there is a plan for me to upload at least that video during the 4-week break. And I might be able to get another video out, but I'm not going to guarantee anything. But yeah, there will be a video coming out during that 4-week break. Again, not next week, but probably, say, towards the end of the week after, around, say, the 3rd, 4th of October, say. That's ideally when I would like to get that particular video out, at the earliest. So, yeah, that video I'm going to try and get out for then. And then if I can get this other video out that I might be able to, then if I can get that other video out before we get back to the season, then I'll try and get that video out. But if not, then I'll be back, obviously, for the US Grand Prix on the, 19th and 20th of October. And to announce as well, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along for the US Grand Prix in 4 weeks' time. So, yeah, that's the plan for the next Grand Prix. But yeah, that video that I've got planned, like I said, first few days of October is most likely when that video will come out. I'm going to probably start work on that probably start of next week. And then when I've got time away from uni, probably towards the end of next week, that I should be able to start editing it and hopefully get it, done. So yeah, just want to let you guys know of that plan, and hopefully that video I can get out and you guys will hopefully enjoy it. But yeah, we have 40 minutes remaining until we're underway. Your boys got him. Interesting name. Says, do you believe Ferrari are going to have a honker of a quali? No, I think they'll be very competitive. They'll be at least locking out the second row. I think that's the worst case result for them. Unless Verstappen or Russell do something mental. Bottle Job FC says, good afternoon, Chaz. That always a race I look forward to. It's a very physical track that seems to go on forever, and of course, it being the original night race. Yeah, it's always, and that's why I love qualifying around here, because it is such a challenge for the drivers, and you have to be an elite driver to get this track right. Astro saying, heard the rumors that this could be Danny Ricciardo's last race. Thoughts? Hope not. Yeah, there is a strong rumor that Liam Lawson is going to replace Daniel Ricciardo after this weekend. and will be in the Racing Bulls car from the US Grand Prix on. What that means for Ricciardo, if that does happen, I don't know. Whether they're still eyeing up putting Ricciardo in the Red Bull for next year. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But if they do put Lawson in the Racing Bulls car, we have to remember that Lawson really does deserve it. Because, I mean, remember back to a year ago here in Singapore, what he did out qualifying Max Verstappen in the AlphaTauri, and then ended up scoring points. And I think he ended up in the points a couple times in the 4 or 5 races that he did. So Lawson deserves to be on the grid, is the point I'm trying to make. And again, what happens to Daniel Ricciardo because of that, we'll have to see. But who knows? Who knows? But Lawson, as I said, he deserves to be on the grid. So I am happy if he does get back on the grid. Let's find some other comments here. The Woden says Ricard's slow as washed. Lando took his soul. Let me just scroll down a bit. When did Ricard slow challenge for a title? To be fair, you're right. I don't think he ever actually contended for a championship. But if he was in the right car back between 2014 and say 2020, if he was in the right car, I think he would have been a very good title contender. But he was, when he was at Red Bull, it was wrong place, wrong time. That, that does happen in Formula One, where you get the dream move to a big team, but it's at the wrong time. It's happened, at Ferrari, for example, for certain top drivers. I'd say I say another example of that would be Jean Alesi when he went to Ferrari. Of course, when he went to Ferrari, for 1991, in 1990, Ferrari were championship contenders, and they really should have won the championship in 1990, at least the driver's title should have Ferrari, but they didn't, for reasons we know why. And going into 1991, people thought Ferrari were going to be really good, and then they ended up not even winning a race that year. And I think, with Alesi, he joined Ferrari at the absolute worst time, as Ferrari were going through their worst era ever. When Alesi, I think the story is that he did have the chance to go to Williams. They offered him a seat, and they were very happy to take him on board. But then I think at the last minute, he decided to go to Ferrari because Ferrari, I think, came in with an offer. But in hindsight, it was the wrong decision, because by the time Alesi left Ferrari, even though Ferrari had improved a bit in the last year or so when he was there, they were still pretty bad. So, like I said, it does happen for certain drivers where you join a team at the wrong time. You could say that with maybe even Kimi Räikkönen when he joined Ferrari back in 2007, where even though Ferrari was still, a title-winning team, it wasn't the peak Ferrari team, where obviously you had Ross Brawn and Rory Byrne along with Jean Todt. So, like I said, it does happen in certain drivers' careers. KH says, I'm curious how Colapinto will do. He should do decently well. I think he definitely, if he if he doesn't, the best he can do today, he should make Q2. Um, let's find some other comments here. Bottle FC, how do you rate Williams' chances of potentially getting sixth in the Constructors' Championship? Well, Racing Bulls are 21 points clear of them with 7 races to go. Realistically, it's not going to happen. I mean, especially if Racing Bulls have a race weekend like they're having this weekend, where they're really competitive and they look like they're probably going to score a couple points. It just makes it too hard for Williams with the races left to be able to, to actually, go for the, for that position. I think maybe Haas in 7th. You can see on the bottom of the screen the Constructors' Championship positions going by now with the points as well. You can see there Williams are 13 points behind Haas. I think that could be doable, maybe just about by the end of the season, especially if Williams get another race like they had in Baku where they score lots of points. But yeah, Racing Bulls in 6th I think might be a bit too far ahead for them. But if they can do it, then I really hope they can finish there, because it would be a remarkable comeback for them, because they were 9th basically all season long up until, we got to Baku. And now they're looking, now they're up in 8th, and now they're looking, very strong. And if they were to climb up to 6th in the championship, which, by the way, they have not finished in the top 6 of the championship since, I think, 2017, which was 7 years ago. Last year, of course, they finished in 7th. If they were to equal last year or better it, then, yeah, that's, you have to say, a great season for Williams, and just another step in the right direction. Right, I'm going to read out one more comment, and then I'm going to post the stream link out one more time. By the way, again, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. We are on 42 likes. Let's try and get up to 50 likes if we can before qualifying gets underway. The Woden says Ricard Slow left Red Bull because he was scared of Max, got dominated by Lando, got sacked. Piastri, the rookie, comes in and pressures Lando. Come Ricciardo, Slow is done. Well, that's that's your view, and I think, to be honest, you could say maybe you're 90% correct with that assessment. Let me just keep scrolling here. Rook saying, any more lizards spotted? None for the moment, but yeah, there was a lizard, I think, one there right at the end of practice 3. But yeah, a lot of talk about Ricardo, I have to say, which is a bit surprising. Will F1 says Norris has bottled 100 points this season. That's the definition of underperforming and bottling what should be an easy championship win. I'm not sure he's bottled 100 points, but yeah, he has bottled a lot of points. There is no doubt about it. I think you could probably say around 50 points he's thrown away this season. I'm not sure about 100 points. I think that's over the top, but yeah, probably 50 points is more fair of an assessment there. But as we've said before, Lando, yeah, he's 59 points behind in the championship. looking very quick this weekend, and that's all great. But whether Lando is going to win the championship or not, it all depends on his performances on race day, obviously, when the points are scored. Another thing we have to remember, guys, is of course we do have, I think, 3 sprint races left. Is it 3 sprint races? Or it's either 3 sprint races or 2 sprint races left this season. So you've also got to factor those in as well. But when it comes to race day on a Sunday, Lando, most of the time in the last few races, has not got the best result he could, except for, say, that Dutch Grand Prix, where he was, phenomenal. But, no matter what has happened so far, he still has a great chance this season to get it done. As I said in my last podcast, all Lando's got to do is outscore Max by 10 points per race between now and the end of the season. If he does that, he will be the champion in Abu Dhabi by 11 points if he was to do literally 10 points per race in terms of outscoring Max. And if you look at this weekend, Max, I would be pretty surprised if Max was on the podium this weekend. So, with Max potentially finishing maybe down in 5th place or 6th place this weekend, if Lando wins, that's a gain of 15 or maybe even 17 points, which is a lot in a championship battle. So, as far as I'm concerned, this weekend, Lando, unless Max finishes 6th or lower, Lando has to win this race. If Max DNFs and Lando only finishes 3rd, yeah, not great, but it's still good enough. But if Max finishes, in the top 5, then Lando absolutely has to win the race. There is no excuse for me going forward for the rest of the year. And the thing is even if Lando does get pole position, will he be able to hold on to that into turn 1? Because he still has this record of not leading the first, all of the first lap of a Grand Prix, which is something he needs to, that's a record he has to get rid of. Because if that keeps going on, then it'll keep getting worse in terms of, him crumbling under pressure. Anyway, before I read out any more comments, let me just post a link of the stream out one final time before we get into the session, which is in about 26 minutes from now. Come join us here to Watchalong qualifying under the lights in Singapore. And there you go. So, yeah, I'll probably read out your comments, guys, for another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll get into the teams individually and how I think they'll all get on, and then of course the typical final couple things we get onto before qualifying: championship standings and stats. But yeah, let's try and find some few good comments here if I can. Astro says, if I was Red Bull, I'd drop Perez and Yuki and put Ricciardo alongside Max, and then have Lawson and Hadjar in the B team. Yuki isn't going to be promoted, so why keep him? What's their plan? Just a stopgap. Well, the thing with Tsunoda is, even though, yeah, he's not part of their plans when it comes to like being in the Red Bull team, they have a great relationship with him, and he's a reliable driver for them because they know that he will do the best he can with whatever car they give him, and he will perform to standard. And that's why they keep him. When with Isaac Hadjar, I know they like Hadjar a bit because he's had some decent test drives here and there, but I don't think Hadjar is F1 quality. I think Hadjar is just not quite on that level. So, yeah, I think that's why, they like Tsunoda. I mean, if they had a clear, if they had a driver in their academy right now who was like the next top or elite driver, then I'm sure they would, probably throw Tsunoda out of that car to get that particular person in there. But if you look at the Red Bull Driver Academy, they've got some good talent, but they've not got anyone you would say who's going to be like clearly a great driver in Formula One in terms of talent level or whatever. But we'll see. There you go. Chelsea 3-0 up. Unfamiliar feeling for me, seeing my team 3-0 up. Feels like I haven't seen it in about 5 years, but yeah, wow. I cannot believe we're actually winning away to West Ham 3-0. We haven't done that in fucking at least like 15 years, to my knowledge. But yeah. Enough of the football. At least I'm happy with that. Normally I'm miserable when it comes to football. Laurie Restokes says, if Norris keeps performing like this, he won't win a championship. If he keeps up his race performance level, which is, for a driver of his quality, pretty poor, then yeah, he won't win the championship. But, like I said, given how quick his car is, it's still very much on him winning the championship. He just needs to knuckle down and deliver. And for a driver of his quality, it should not be that hard. Bolt of FC says, whose idea was it to have a 4-week break between this race and Austin? Absolutely ridiculous, especially as there's back-to-back triple headers after this break. I think that's probably why they're doing a 4-week break. It's to give the mechanics and all a break before the last big, load of races, which of course they really come up really quickly. Like you say, triple header, and then right after that you've got a 2-week break until Las Vegas, and then another 2-week break, and then you've got a final back to back. It's like, what is it? I think it's what, 6 races in 8 weeks. I think once we get to the US Grand Prix, which is again pretty hectic. So I think that's why they've gone for that break, just to give people a rest before that big last push. But yeah, I mean, they could have maybe spaced it out better, but that's the way it is. I mean, I don't necessarily mind it, but yeah. I mean, given how good the season's been, it is a bit frustrating. And unfortunately, next year we will be having although next year we won't be having a 4-week break between Singapore and the US Grand Prix. Next year it's only 2 weeks because they're going to space it out better, which is good. Next year, instead of Baku and Singapore being a back-to-back, it's going to be separated by a couple weeks, which will make it a bit smoother, the second half of the year's calendar. And then next year, though, the final 3 races next year are a triple header. Las Vegas, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. So if the championship is really close between a few drivers, that triple header at the end of the season is, it's all going to come down to that. And of course, when it comes to next year's calendar, the first 2 races are in Melbourne and Shanghai. So it'll be quite a different start to the season than what we're used to. But good to be going back to Melbourne for the first race of the year, because that's the way it should be, really. Melbourne, it offers chaos that the first race usually delivers of a season. That's what it was known for. And yeah, it's great that Melbourne will be the first race of the year. I don't think it's a permanent thing. I think it's only for maybe this year. But, or not for this year, sorry, next year. But yeah. What it does mean, though, and I was thinking this earlier, was that with the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix taking place in April, obviously those races will be quite a bit hotter. Even though they're still at night, they'll be quite a bit hotter than they were, than they were, say, this year, where the races were at the start of March, which might make a difference to those particular races. Astro says 2 weeks is a good gap with the occasional back-to-back weekend. The long breaks just drag and get annoying. One such break, maybe 2 of them, please no. Well, of course, we normally get the summer break, which is normally the break you get in a season. So to have basically 2 of them is weird, to be honest, and it's quite unusual. But I think the only other time I remember there being a long break between one race and another and it not being the summer break was actually the first F1 season for when I was alive. The 1998 season, where the gap between the penultimate and final race was like 5 weeks or something, which again was ridiculous. I don't know if they did that on purpose to build suspense for that final race, and of course the championship was on the line, wasn't it, between Hakkinen and Schumacher? Yeah, let me just. So yeah, the penultimate race of 1998 was on the 27th of September of 98, and then the Japanese Grand Prix, one race later, the final race was on the 1st of November. So yeah, that's what that would have been. That would have been 5 weeks. Again, I have absolutely no idea why they decided for there to be a 5-week break. I don't know if there was a race that there was supposed to be in between there that was cancelled, but yeah, for some reason, there was a 5-week break. Imagine if, let's say back in 2021, after that Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which was the penultimate race that year, imagine if we had a 5-week break between then and the final race in Abu Dhabi. Imagine the suspense and the build-up. It would be it'd be mental, it being that long. And it would be, well, quite frankly, way too long. But yeah, that's what it was like back then for some reason. Williford says there was supposed to be a race in October 98, but didn't happen. Let me go back to the Wikipedia for that season and see if it might have been. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, it was the Portuguese Grand Prix. It was supposed to be. It was supposed to be on the 11th of October, but it says the race was cancelled as the government refused to pay for the required safety upgrades. And that is the reason, if you're wondering, why Estoril, a brilliant classic track, if you're wondering why that's not been on the calendar since 1996, it's because the government refuses to upgrade it, like it said, and yeah, the safety grade it has is not high enough for a Formula One event or even I think even a WEC event or anything like that. Which is why when there's ever going to be an F1 race in Portugal, it'll always be Portimao rather than Estoril, because Estoril isn't safe anymore. Which is a shame, because that Estoril track is a proper circuit. Really high speed corners, really physical track, but sadly isn't around anymore. But the Portimao track, I think, has a lot of what makes that Estoril track good, which is why I really hope in the future we can go back to that Portimao circuit, because I really like it. I think it's a great circuit. And the couple races we had there were great. Great overtaking, great action. Yeah, it was just absolutely brilliant. Anyway, we have got just under 15 minutes to go until we get into this qualifying session. Before we get into it, though, let me just quickly go through the teams and how I think they'll all get on today in this qualifying session. For Red Bull, I think, again, third or fourth at best in terms of the best teams. I think that's what they are, most likely. And I think their aim has to be a third row grid position. If they can lock out the third row, that would be absolutely brilliant. But I would be very surprised if both Red Bulls were on the third row. I can see one of the Red Bulls on the third row. But yeah, both of them on the third row would be quite the shock. And if they do somehow get inside the top four on the grid, then that would be, quite frankly, a fantastic result given where their car's at right now and how they've looked so far this weekend. So yeah, don't expect pole position contention from Red Bull because their car isn't good enough for that. But if Max Verstappen, if he can perform at his best, might be able to get in the top 5 of the grid, which I think is possible. Ferrari, contenders for pole, but definitely I would not say are likely for pole. I still think it's in McLaren's hands and Lando Norris's hands. Leclerc and Ferrari, though, looking very good. They've always been super competitive, Ferrari, here in Singapore. They've had so many pole positions here in the history of the Singapore Grand Prix. It's been one of the most successful tracks for them in the last, say, decade. And for Ferrari, once again, looking very competitive and look as though that they could maybe snatch pole position again. But again, it really comes down, I think, to what Lando Norris does in the McLaren. If Norris doesn't quite produce the best Q3 lap, maybe then Leclerc can take pole. But again, it all really comes down to what Norris does in the McLaren. But Ferrari should be, I think, really getting on the front row with Leclerc, given how slow Piastri is compared to his teammate. For Mercedes-Benz, similar to Red Bull, I think they can get a car on the third row, but it's going to be very, very tight. George Russell looking competitive in the Mercedes, but again, Mercedes not in the fight for pole position. Lewis Hamilton, though, as I said earlier, I think he will make the top 10, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's knocked out in Q2 because his current form is dreadful and he has not looked confident really at all this weekend in that car. And McLaren, for me, are the favourites for pole as they were coming into the weekend. Their car is very well suited for this track. And as long as, with Lando Norris, he executes the lap in Q3, he should be on pole position. If you look at some of the high aero tracks we've been to recently, Zandvoort, the Hungaroring, the last couple, McLaren have dominated, and it shouldn't be any different, really, here in Singapore. Have to get pole. Absolutely have to get pole. There is no excuse for McLaren today. Yeah, Ferrari looked good, but in terms of the championship compared to Red Bull, again, they've got no excuse. Red Bull are not there contending. Aston Martin have got to improve. Fernando Alonso, we know, is very quick around this circuit. So if Aston Martin can improve, then they've got someone in Alonso who could drag out a special enough lap to maybe get them into a position they don't quite deserve to be in. So Alonso will watch out for what he does. Again, he's always been super quick around this circuit. Lance Stroll, I would imagine, will be knocked out at best in Q2, but I wouldn't really be surprised, given Aston Martin's pace so far this weekend, if he was knocked out in Q1. Racing Bulls look like the team to beat in the midfield pack. Been very quick all weekend. Tsunoda and Ricciardo have been very close to each other on pace. And as long as they keep that up, I don't see why they can't get both cars into Q3. Tsunoda, of course, has plenty of experience of doing well here. And, of course, so does Daniel Ricciardo, who before here has qualified on the front row. So the drivers, they've got, as long as the drivers deliver the laps needed, then they should be absolutely fine to get, again, both cars into Q3. Something we haven't said with them for quite a while. Alpine, they should be better, Alpine, than they are, but from what we've seen so far, they look like one of the slowest teams. But I would be interested to see whether there's a bit more in the tank there with Alpine, because I was expecting them to be maybe not contenders, like strong contenders to get into Q3, but I was definitely expecting a bit more than what we've seen, so far this weekend. So Alpine, watch out for them. Might be a bit better than we've seen so far. Williams have been pretty strong so far. Alex Albon, watch out for him. He is a dark horse, I think, to get into Q3. Been very strong as of late as Alex Albon. He's been getting into Q3 quite a lot recently in a new and improved Williams car. Also, we'll keep an eye on Franco Colapinto to see what he can do in the second Williams. His first time racing here in Singapore. But Williams in general look pretty decent, but it is going to be close between them, Haas, Aston Martin, as to, if there is to be a surprise entry into Q3. Again, it's between those teams as to who is going to do it. And then Sauber, load of shit as usual. And Haas, they look decent. They're just not good enough, I don't think, to get into Q3. They just don't have enough grip around this track. And normally, we see with them at circuits with a bit more straights, they're able to be, say, Q3, proper Q3 contenders. But yeah, this track not quite like that. So Hulkenberg, Magnussen, maybe they can get both cars into Q2, but I would be surprised, very surprised, if they got into Q3. And here is a reminder of my qualifying prediction, guys. I think Lando Norris will take pole from Leclerc second, Piastri third, Sainz fourth, Verstappen fifth, Russell sixth, seventh Perez, eighth Tsunoda, ninth Ricciardo, and Lewis Hamilton, I think, will be P10. So that's my prediction for qualifying. Let me know in the chat, guys, whether you agree or disagree. Remember, there is a poll running still at the top of the live chat where I've asked you guys, who do you think will take pole in Singapore? And your four options are Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, as to who you think will take pole position. And, of course, in probably about 45 minutes from now, I will finish up the results of that poll and we'll have a look to see who you guys have said is most likely taking pole out of those four options. But yeah, let me just read out a couple final comments if I can, and then we'll get into this session. Weather forecast, please. It should be dry. There was rain after practice 2 yesterday, but I've looked at the weather forecast. It should be dry for qualifying. There is, I think, a 20% chance of rain for tomorrow in the race, but again, I don't think it's going to rain. It should be absolutely fine. And Astro saying in the chat, got a feeling Haas may do well tonight. Don't know, but Hulk and K-Mag can both qualify really well. Wouldn't surprise me if one of both Haas cars make Q3. Well, they've made Q3 a lot this year, so statistically it wouldn't exactly be a surprise, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But let me hide that timer, guys, and go into a final couple pieces of information before we get into qualifying in Singapore. Firstly, the championship standings. Max Verstappen, 59 points clear of Lando Norris. Norris has to get pole in this session today to maximise his result here for his World Championship. Max Verstappen, of course, the same. Has to get the best result possible, because here in Singapore, if you end up with a poor qualifying, it could really hamper your race, and you end up with a really poor race result. Hard to come back from it. Charles Leclerc in third. You could say technically is in the championship fight as well, but he would really need to get pole and win this weekend if he's going to actually have a chance at winning the championship. Oscar Piastri in fourth. He's still on the hunt for Leclerc, just ahead. Carlos Sainz in fifth. Hamilton in sixth. Russell in seventh, level on points with Sergio Perez in eighth. And then a massive drop-off to Fernando Alonso in ninth and Lance Stroll in P10. And on the constructors' side, for the first time since the first race of 2014, just over 10 years ago, McLaren lead the Constructors' Championship and lead by 20 points over Red Bull. Ferrari still in the fight. They're in third and they are, 51 points behind McLaren with 7 races to go. So Ferrari not out of the fight just yet. Mercedes in fourth. They're obviously going to finish there. Aston Martin fifth. Same for them. Racing Bulls in sixth. This is a key race for Racing Bulls with the pace they've got to pull away from Haas if they can, who are in seventh and 5 points behind them. Williams in eighth now with 16 points, 3 points clear of Alpine, and Sauber still pointless and useless. But let's go on to the front-running teams and some stats regarding those teams before we get to this session. For Red Bull, their last pole position in Singapore was all the way back in 2013 with Sebastian Vettel. They've always been competitive here. Obviously won the race a couple years ago with Sergio Perez. But again, they've been very competitive in qualifying a lot of years, but they've never been able since 2013 to actually get on pole position. So yeah, 11 years without pole in Singapore. And Red Bull have only taken pole position twice in Singapore since we started racing here in 2008, which is remarkable given how this car most of the time has suited this circuit. Red Bull, though, as well, very poor effort in qualifying as of late. They have only taken pole, although they have not taken pole, or not taken a pole position, if I can speak English, in 7 races. It was back in Austria at the Red Bull Ring, the last time they took pole position in Formula 1. For Ferrari, they've got a great record here in Singapore. They've taken pole in Singapore in the last 3 editions of this Grand Prix, 2019, 2022, and 2023. And they've taken 5 poles in Singapore since 2015, with a couple of those ending up in victory. And Ferrari as well, pretty good in qualifying as of late. They have started on pole in 2 of the last 4 races. For Mercedes, their last pole position in Singapore was in 2018 with Lewis Hamilton, one of the best pole laps ever in Formula 1. Mercedes have taken pole twice in Singapore since 2015. Mercedes' last pole position, though, was 6 races ago at Silverstone. And for McLaren, their last pole was in 2012 here in Singapore with Lewis Hamilton. And obviously that weekend, Hamilton unable to go on to victory. McLaren have only taken pole twice in Singapore since 2008. And McLaren, despite that, they are still the most informed team when it comes to qualifying. They have taken pole in 3 of the last 5 races. Can they do it yet again? as qualifying, guys, has already begun. We're about 25 seconds in. And I'll get the timer on the screen for you guys in about 20 seconds from now. And I'll sync it up at the 17-minute mark as we've got the Ferrari there of Leclerc entering the track now with his teammate Sainz just behind. And there you go. 17 minutes to go in Q1. And let's see who will get eliminated. The two Saubers surely will be eliminated. One of the Alpines at least, I think, as well. So yeah, I think those are three cars you could probably say definitely will get eliminated here. But again, a couple spots up for grabs. As we look at these two Ferrari cars. The pole position time, by the way, should be, I think, between a 1:29.4 and a 1:29.7. Because the best time in practice 2 was a 1:30.7. So, yeah, I think anywhere between a 1:29.4 and a 1:29.7 is what pole position will be today. So watch out for the lap times to understand when, say, a certain driver has done a good lap. And once we get to Q3, if someone can immediately bang it into the 1:29s, then they are looking very much like a contender for pole. As we're looking at the McLaren on the TV broadcast of Oscar Piastri, is it? No, Lando Norris, actually. In the re-liveried McLaren. It's the livery that really they used at Monaco back in, was it 2021? Or even earlier this year, maybe? With the white on the side pod. Decent livery. And looks good under the lights. But nothing looks as good as the scarlet red Ferrari car, which is belting its way down to turn 7, which is the best overtaking opportunity at this track. As Leclerc obviously has done a purple first sector. As violently throwing the car into turn 9. That was nicely done. Literally threw it in like a dart. And Leclerc pushing hard early on. As he comes into turn 13, the left-handed hairpin. And for the Ferrari car, given how good it is through the corners now, there's not really a weak point for this car at this track. The only part of the track where they're probably going to be losing a bit more to, say, McLaren is going to be this final sector, purely because McLaren are so strong in the final sector. But Esteban Ocon has gone quickest for Alpine. Bottas up to second. But here comes Charles Leclerc. He does a 1:30.8. And that is a very good first lap time. That's probably going to be about 1.2 to 1.4 seconds away from pole. And almost 2 seconds quicker he was than Ocon. As Perez goes third. And 7/10 of a second. Well, no, second Perez goes. And 7/10 of a second off the pace. As Lando Norris does a purple first sector. A 1/10.5 up on Leclerc. And really the fight for pole is between Norris and Leclerc. Two outstanding talents. But it is Leclerc who's been performing better as of late. So we've got 6 times on the board so far. Leclerc, Perez, Ocon, Bottas, Gasly, Zhou has landed as a purple middle sector. So this is going to be, surely, P1 for Lando. And let's see how quick it is. As Piastri is slightly up on Leclerc so far, which is looking good for him. Here comes Norris. Goes nearly 0.2 quicker, 130.7. And that is, like Leclerc, a cracking first lap time of qualifying. Probably won't need to do another lap, really, in terms of, getting through to Q2, because that's probably already good enough. As Oscar Piastri, a lot closer to his teammate than he's been so far this weekend. Only a quarter of a second away, and goes third. As is a replay of Sainz going deep at the first corner, and that's why he hasn't done a lap time yet, and he's backed off. But he is on a lap now. And he does a purple middle sector. If he has a good final sector, he might be able to sneak into third place. Of course, remember, Carlos Sainz, this time last year, was God here in Singapore. What a performance he put in both qualifying and the race. Was the best race weekend of his career, without doubt. Of his career, without doubt. I don't know why I said in career. As Carlos Sainz goes slightly behind Piastri and goes fourth, as Alex Albon goes ahead of Sergio Perez and up to P5, as Colapinto goes seventh and quite slow compared to his teammate. So Albon fifth, Colapinto up to P7, but Colapinto 1.2 seconds slower than his teammate on that lap. So yeah, clearly can improve, as Lewis Hamilton is sweating his way through these corners. Let's see what the middle sector is like. And pretty good for middle sector for Hamilton. Only a 1/10.5 down on Norris after 2 sectors. That's really good compared to what we've been expecting from Mercedes. As Russell, half a second down after the first 2 sectors. So Lewis Hamilton on one on this lap. Into the final corner he comes. Very bad final sector, but he does go up to P5. He lost half a second to Norris in the final sector alone, as Perez improves his lap time but stays in 7th, but he's not 7th for long, as George Russell goes 7th. Just shows you how far off the pace already Mercedes and Red Bull are. Well over half a second off, as that's a replay of Colapinto getting out of shape through, what was it, turn 16? And then hitting the wall on the exit of 18. So he will need a checkup before he goes anywhere. As Ricciardo goes up to P9. And Tsunoda goes up to 5th on a 1:31.3, as Max Verstappen's on a good lap here. Purple first sector, as Alonso goes now 5th quickest, as Magnussen goes up to 6th. But here's Max Verstappen. What can he do with his first run? A 1:30.8. And that puts him second. That is the best pace we've seen from that Red Bull all weekend. If he keeps that up compared to McLaren, he is obviously right in the fight where he needs to be to minimise the damage for his championship. Hülkenberg is now up to P5. Obviously, Hülkenberg, Magnussen high up because they've done their laps later on than others, which has helped their position. Esteban Ocon has just gone up to 8th place. Kevin Magnussen is in 9th, as Leclerc now goes up to 2nd on a 1:30.7. Only a slight improvement on the soft tyre. By the way, this weekend, the soft tyre is the C5, so the 3 softest compounds Pirelli have brought here this weekend. As Bottas has just gone up to 16th place, I think, ahead of his teammate Zhou. And Colapinto is now 18th. And then you've got now Gasly's in 16th. So Gasly, Bottas, Zhou, Colapinto, and Stroll make up the bottom 5 with 7.5 minutes remaining. As here's a replay of Verstappen at turn 9 and oversteering through the middle of it, which is a common thing we see with this Red Bull. Without that, though, I think he could have remained in second ahead of Leclerc if it wasn't for that. Oh, there's Leclerc. He made a mistake on that previous lap at turn 13. The hairpin went too deep. That would have cost him probably 2 or 3 tenths of a second. And that's Gasly going slightly on the curb. And then here is Carlos Sainz getting out of shape. So the drivers pushing hard out there. But the thing is here in Singapore is, even though, yeah, the walls are so close and you know, there's so many opportunities to crash, you have got to attack this racetrack. If you don't attack it, you don't get the lap time out of it. It's one of those tracks that you've got to attack it to get the time out of it. Another track like that, obviously, Monaco. Imola is another one where if you don't quite attack the curbs there, you just don't get the lap time. But most people in the pits now, and we've got just under 6 minutes to go as we await the final run in Q1. And yeah, in the drop zone, Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Franco Colapinto, and Lance Stroll, last of all, in the Aston Martin. That'd be humiliating if Stroll ended up in 20th. As we're looking here at Alex Albon on an outlap. Williams deciding to go early here, which is a surprise. Hopefully doesn't come back to bite them, because obviously in the final 5 minutes the track will get a lot quicker with, you know, track evolution. And Albon going and doing his lap time now, again, might not pay off when we get to the very end of the session, but let's see how good it can be. He's currently P12. There's only half a second separating the top 10. As Albon races down to turn 7. And very good first sector for Albon. As in the top right of the screen, they're showing a replay of Lewis Hamilton going deep at turn 1, probably to let someone through, I would imagine. Or he just went deep because of a rear brake lockup. Was there smoke from the rear end? Maybe. I could see, not quite sure. But, Albon, I think, might have clipped the barriers there on the exit of turn 13. But he does a purple middle sector nonetheless. Pushing hard and getting the reward is Alexander Albon. And if he can go quickest with this lap, then that will probably be enough for him to get through to Q2. Because I can't imagine anyone doing anything better than a 130.7 will get knocked out in Q1. And he does go quickest. A 130.6. And that is good enough, definitely, to get him into Q2. No doubt about that. Here comes Lando Norris, though. 2 purple sectors. And a 130.0. What a lap that is for Q1. A 130.002. That is probably only half a second away from what pole position will be. A stonker of a lap from Lando Norris, who clearly is on it. And yeah, there's a replay of Albon giving the barrier on the exit at turn 13 a love tap. But like I said, he got the reward, and that lap time, like I said, it should be good enough for him to go through. Piastri up to second now. quarter of a second away from his teammate. And Lewis Hamilton did say on the radio right before his lap here that he's now doing that the track is ramping up. And yeah, it is. But Mercedes 12th and 13th now. So they've got to deliver on these laps if they're going to get through to the second part of qualifying. But Lewis Hamilton has not had a good first sector. First sector, though, the least important. So as long as the rest of the lap is as good as possible, he should be okay. George Russell has had a personal best first sector. So has Sergio Perez. Much better in the first sector for Perez. As we've got 2 minutes to go. As Hamilton comes down to turn 13. All good through there. What's the middle sector like? 0.3 of a second down. This lap is probably going to put him 6th or 7th, I would say. As Russell, 6.5 tenths down on Norris after the first 2 sectors. I think Russell might be in a bit of trouble here. Not having a good lap is Russell. And really, Sergio Perez not having a great lap either. But here comes Lewis Hamilton. Great final sector compared to what he did earlier. And it's a 1:30.3. He is up to 3rd. George Russell, 1:30.8. He goes 8th. I think Russell could be in trouble there. Well, no, he went up to 6th, actually. Now 7th as Sergio Perez goes 4th. As Russell in 8th. And yeah, I think he might be in trouble if all these drivers behind really get their laps right. As Ricciardo only goes up to 12th. That is not a great attempt. Needed to improve, I think, more than that as we enter the final 30 seconds. We now look at Kevin Magnussen as Fernando Alonso goes up to 7th place. So he should be okay. Magnussen, P10. Will that be enough? Carlos Sainz is done P12. He needs to improve. Tsunoda goes up to 8th. As Colapinto out there improving. Russell saying, I've got no fucking grip, mate. It's totally different to FP3. Totally. Colapinto up to 8th. What a final lap there by the Argentinian. As the checkered flag has now fallen. These are, of course, your final laps. Hulkenberg up to P10 as Leclerc has dropped down to 11th. As Max Verstappen's improved up to 2nd. Lots of improvements here. I can't quite keep track. Lance Stroll goes 16th. He is out. Shocking effort from Stroll. Eliminated in Q1. Ocon up to 14th. So Ricciardo is out in Q1. Zhou stays in 19th. Valtteri Bottas. Where does he go? He goes up to 18th. Where does Pierre Gasly go? Only 18th. So there you have it. There is your drop zone. As Carlos Sainz improves up to 6th place. Let me just update a couple positions here which are incorrect. So Max Verstappen up to 2nd. Sainz in 6th. And then Leclerc ended up dropping down to P12. So, yeah. George Russell, I have to say, he did moan a lot after that lap about having no grip, and he was lucky that the others behind didn't improve quite enough, because he could have been in real trouble there. But, guys, that is Q1 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the second part of qualifying. Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso, Franco Colapinto, Yuki Tsunoda, Nico Hulkenberg, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Kevin Magnussen, and Esteban Ocon. And eliminated in Q1, Daniel Ricciardo, Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, Valtteri Bottas, and Zhou Guanyu. And anyone that wants to say Ricard slow, go for it, because yeah, you should, because that was a poor performance by Ricciardo. And if this is to be his last ever F1 race, then so be it, because Liam Lawson, we know, deserves his opportunity, and I think Lawson probably would have done a better would have done a better job, I think, than Ricciardo did there. Simply not enough from Ricciardo. Will F1 proudly stating Ricard slow. But yeah, Ricciardo just not good enough. I thought I was going to say something then, but I can't remember what I was going to say, to be honest. Yeah, that was it. For everyone watching, if you haven't already, smash that like button. Does help the channel grow in the algorithm. And again, does help me show that you guys enjoy the content. So let's try and get up to, say, 70 likes if we can in the next 20 minutes. That'd be great if we could do that. But yeah, Q2 will be underway in a couple minutes' time. And obviously it'll be a 15-minute long session. And Mercedes, I mean, with Lewis Hamilton, they looked very quick with Hamilton in Q1. But with Russell, yeah, he said after that final lap in Q1 that he had no grip and it felt totally different to practice. So, yeah. We'll have to see whether Russell can get it together in this second part of qualifying. But at least for Russell, he got through, and there is time to rectify any issues with maybe a front wing balance change or something like that. But yeah, as Anthony Davidson on Sky F1 is just reviewing, I think, Ricciardo's on board, and looks like he probably made a mistake coming up to turn 17, I'm guessing. And or was it turn 18? No. I mean, a couple little adjustments of the steering wheel, but that end of the lap for Ricciardo did not look that bad. So it just fundamentally wasn't quick enough on the lap. Is a replay. They're showing of Perez going deep at the hairpin. Perez, though, ended up in P5. You got to say, Red Bull in that session were probably the main surprise, because Max ended up only a 10.5 away from Lando. But do Red Bull have any more pace in the bag? You know, can they keep that up compared to McLaren? If they can, then, you know, if Max can qualify on the front row, that would be perfect for him and Red Bull, because for the Drivers' Championship, it would limit a lot the damage. But long way to go, and Leclerc, I'm sure, will have something to say about Max. As Max saying on the radio, unbelievable bunch of idiots, man. They are in the background, I think he said there. Of course, Max not saying truly what he wants to, because he's been given a penalty, not a on-track penalty or anything, but he has to do basically community service for the FIA for swearing in the, was it Thursday press conference? Because the FIA president suddenly has decided he doesn't like swearing and doesn't like the amount of swearing on the radio, when, to be honest, it's not the driver's fault. It's FOM, and, you know, it's up to them what radio messages get broadcast. And plus, they bleep out the swear words, so I really don't get his problem. But I have to say, his comparison that he used, Ben Sulayem, the president of the FIA, the comparison he used to justify why we shouldn't have swearing was a bit racial, let's say, saying, oh, we're not rappers, and, degrading them basically, and saying, oh, we're not the, we're not like those peasant rappers who swear all the time, pretending as though those are the only people that swear in music, which we know is total bullshit. There you go, 14 minutes to go in Q2, and let me just get up the other bits there. There you go. So yeah, Ben Sulayem's on a power trip, and is trying to inflict his own moral outlook on everyone else when he's just a fucking idiot and needs to fuck off forever. Yeah, that's what he needs to do, because he's a total fucking clown. Is the FIA president. And genuinely, I'd rather Bernie Ecclestone be the FIA president than him. At least Bernie knows, Bernie has said some ridiculous stuff over the years, but at least Bernie, is more in touch. I'm not sure I would say that, but he's more on the driver's side, and he does still have a bit of common sense left, even though he's fucking ancient at this point. Was at the Italian Grand Prix, though, 3 weeks ago, still looking fine, as Sergio Perez has completed the first sector on his first Q2 lap. But yeah, 1:30.0 was the best time there in Q1. And I think definitely we're going to see them dipping into the 129s here in Q2. How far into the 129s they go, we'll have to find out. But Max Verstappen has done a purple first sector. That's only compared to his teammate, the two Williamses, and the Haas of Magnussen, I think, so far. As we're looking at Sergio Perez is coming towards the final couple corners of the lap. As Perez has had a decent weekend. Nothing special, but he's doing the best he can. You can't accuse him of being too slow. As Perez does a 1:30.6. That definitely is, though, too slow. But maybe was done on a used set of tyres. Here comes Max Verstappen, though. Let's see how quick this is. It's all big oversteer moment through the final corner. And he does a 1:30.3. But he would have lost probably a tenth of a second there. But yeah, I think the two Red Bulls definitely on a used set of tyres. As Alex Albon goes third. And probably everyone going to do their first time on a used set. No reason to burn up a set if you don't have to. And of course, you've got the race tomorrow. As Lando Norris is in a purple first sector, even quicker than the two Ferrari cars. As Max Verstappen has had his time deleted. So, as Kevin Magnussen, quicker than the two Williamses in second now. Yeah, Verstappen will have to go again. As Hülkenberg goes quickest on a 1:30.3, 0.3 of a second, pretty much quicker than Perez in the Red Bull. Brilliant lap by Hülkenberg. But here comes Lando Norris, who does a 1:30.007. And if that is on a used set of tyres, that is incredible, because he has done pretty much the exact same lap time. Leclerc, 1:30.2, goes second. Carlos Sainz comes to the line. Goes fourth. There's a purple final sector on a 1:30.5. So there you go. And Piastri goes third on a 1:30.3. So Norris, Leclerc, Piastri is the top three, which is what I think it'll be in Q3. Tsunoda has gone up to 5th. But again, I think everyone here on used tyres is there is a replay of Verstappen clipping the wall in the exit turn 13. But that's not what cost him in terms of the lap being deleted. He had a moment like that earlier in practice 3 through that final corner. The rear end just not sticking. And that's part of the reason Red Bull in the last few races have not been as quick as they were earlier in the season, as Lando there having a tank slapper out of turn 14. And thankfully for him, not hitting the barrier, but still ended up quickest. So maybe could have got even quicker. But yeah, Max is in the drop zone. And who else have we got setting a time? Alonso in 9th. Ocon in 12th. Verstappen 13th, of course, had his time deleted. We now look at the 2 Mercedes cars. And again, after the first sector, Lewis Hamilton looking the quicker driver, which is surprising because Russell has been looking better all weekend in this different liveried Mercedes. The blue and black Mercedes as opposed to the silver and black. And good exit there for Hamilton from turn 13 as he passes the green mean machine of Fernando Alonso. And Lewis Hamilton, yeah, good lap. Well, decent lap so far. It's going to put him comfortably in the top 10, but it's not going to put him anywhere near the top 3. I don't think, unless this final sector is really good. George Russell not really having the greatest lap. Here comes Hamilton through the final corner. And Lewis Hamilton, with an amazing final sector, goes quickest. A 1:29.9. And Russell goes 3rd, and he does the purple final sector. So Mercedes, surely on fresh tyres there. But yeah, 1:29.9 for Hamilton, and he is quickest, and Russell in 3rd. Mercedes will have to go again, of course, to make sure that they get through to Q3. But that is a lot more like it. But if Norris and Leclerc and Piastri and that, if they did do their time on used tyres, which I think they did, that just shows you the gulf between Mercedes and those teams right now. That Hamilton only barely quicker than Norris on a fresh set of tyres. Russell saying on the radio, man, I'm still really struggling out here. Don't know where all this grip has gone since practice. And his radio, his engineer saying, A firm understood. And yeah, Russell just suddenly way slower than his teammate, which is not great. But Max Verstappen we're now seeing out on the track. And because Verstappen had that time deleted, that's now cost him here in Q2, because now, to play it safe, he has to go out here at the 6-minute mark and do another lap on fresh tyres when, you know, this lap might put him quickest when he does it, but, what do you call it? Even if he goes quickest, everyone else is going to be a lot quicker at the end of this session, so he might drop down quite a few positions. So this has to be a P1 lap for Max Verstappen. Because like I said, if it isn't, he'll drop down the order a lot and might be at risk of a elimination here in Q2, which of course he doesn't want for the 2nd year running. As Verstappen warms his tyres up down to turn 17, 18. And here he comes. Max Verstappen starts what could be his final lap in Q2. Will it get him through comfortably to Q3? Has to be a 1:29 something. if he's going to get through. As Verstappen so far on this lap on the edge, but no mistakes or anything so far. Verstappen, good first sector compared to Lewis Hamilton, 10th and a bit quicker. As Verstappen into turn 9. Brilliant corner turn 9. You can really throw the car in there. And same with turn 10 as well. And then a tricky little chicane almost. Turn 11, 12, and then into the hairpin of 13. As, Max didn't quite get the front end in as much as he wanted to. But it still looks good. And yet, purple middle sector. So if he keeps this up, he'll go quickest, and he should then be okay enough to get through to Q3. As, bit of a slide there through turn 16. Now through the final corner. Much better this time. And he does a 1:29.6. And that is definitely good enough. I think I may have to, though, revise what I think the pole position time is going to be. Because if Max is doing a 1:29.6 in Q2, and Norris probably will go quicker than that here, then, yeah, pole position, we're probably looking at a low 1:29, probably anywhere between a 1:29.0 and a 1:29.3, I think is what we're looking at for pole position. As Verstappen, in a couple of the corners, is just showing replays of his lap, getting very close to the wall, as close as you really want to. And that's why Max Verstappen ended up going quickest. But yeah, that lap definitely is good enough to get him through. No doubt about it. As we look at the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, out-qualifying Gasly this weekend. And currently 15th. Can he do something to get his car into a decent grid position? If he can get this into like 13th on the grid, then I think that'd be a pretty good effort from Ocon, considering Alpine just simply don't seem to be that quick. As Leclerc does a purple first sector, nearly a 10th up on Max. So here come the other front runners as Hamilton, Norris and Russell are on outlaps. As Carlos Sainz way off his teammate in the first sector, a quarter of a second down in the first sector. As Esteban Ocon coming down to the middle sector point, and he's only just under 0.3 off Perez. So he's not going to get into Q3. But yeah, he'll go up to 14th definitely, but not sure if he can get ahead of Albon here. As Piastri goes quickest by 0.04 of a second or so on a 1:29.6. Here comes Esteban Ocon. Great final sector, and he goes 11th. Great effort. Alpine simply not good enough to get through to Q3. As Leclerc up to third, a 1:29.7. Not the greatest final sector. But there you go, as here comes Carlos Sainz, who only does a 1:30.1. Not a good lap from Carlos, that. As now we're looking at Fernando Alonso in 13th. And surely Alonso will improve. And he does, and he goes up to 9th. But whether that'll be enough, I'm not sure if it will, to be honest. As here comes Kevin Magnussen down in 13th. Now goes up to P12. So he's out in Q2. Alex Albon, only 10th he goes up to. I don't think that's going to be good enough. Here comes Colapinto. What can he do compared to his teammate? He goes 11th, and he's 0.007 of a second behind, a James Bond of a second behind his teammate, as Yuki Tsunoda goes up to 8th. Brilliant effort from him. So it's just Sergio Perez we're looking for. And Perez has improved his lap time, but he stays in 13th. A shocking effort from Perez, who reverts back to pipe and is knocked out in Q2 as Hulkenberg up to 7th. And I think it was Astro who shouted out Haas and said, I think they can make it to Q3. Well, there you go. Absolutely bang on the money you were. But Sergio Perez, what on earth has happened? Almost a second slower than Max in Q2 out of nowhere, and he's 13th on the grid. A disaster for Perez, but like I said, reverting back to type of what we saw a few races ago, getting knocked out in Q2, Q1, all over the place. But there you go, guys. That's Q2 over and done with. And let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the shootout. Oscar Piastri, Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, who, by the way, saved a set of tyres for Q3. Carlos Sainz, Nico Hulkenberg, George Russell, Yuki Tsunoda, and Fernando Alonso. And knocked out in Q2, Alex Albon, Franco Colapinto, Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, Kevin Magnussen, and Esteban Ocon. So, there you go. And I have to say, good job from Williams, 11th and 12th. I think that's realistically the best they could have done. And from that position, there's no reason why they can't score points. Maybe they could have got into the top 10, you could say. But, I mean, I think if Albon had got into the top 10, I don't think he would have been any higher than 10th in Q3. So, yeah, it doesn't really make a massive difference, to be honest. And actually, Albon gets to start on the clean side of the grid from 11th place. But yeah, Colapinto, shout out to him. He was, as I said, he was a James Bond of a second slower than Alex Albon. 0.007 behind Albon. The credit to him. But now, it is all about the shootout. And still, for me, it is between McLaren and Ferrari, and Lando Norris, for me, is the clear favourite for pole position. But can he deliver the laps when it matters? Because that is, you know, that's what matters at the end of the day. It's not about necessarily how quick you are. It's about delivering your best effort. But yeah, Q3 underway in what do you call it? In 2-3 minutes time, and we'll get into what should be a very exciting fight for pole position. What do you call it? What was I gonna say? Yeah, quickly again. Make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. We're on 65 likes. Let's try and get up to 70 if we can in the next 5 minutes or so. That'd be great if we could. And as well, if you haven't voted in the poll at the top of the live chat, make sure to do so. We've got just under 400 votes, so let's make sure we get over 400 votes, and then I'll finish up the poll results, and then we'll see who you guys have voted for as the man to take pole in Singapore. But, yeah. The only shock so far, or couple shocks, is, yeah, Ricciardo eliminated in Q1, and then, yeah, Perez eliminated in Q2. But, yeah, still for me, McLaren versus Ferrari for pole. And then Red Bull with Verstappen look like they've got the edge definitely on Mercedes, I would say. It's all about whether Max actually produces the lap. If he produces his best lap, then Verstappen should be ahead of the two Mercedes cars, which needs to be his aim. Max has got to be obviously ahead of Hulkenberg, Tsunoda, Alonso, but especially ahead of the two Mercedes cars. If he can do that, then fifth on the grid is, realistically where that car should be. But if he can nip ahead of Sainz, who isn't looking great so far, and get fourth, even better. Home on the tosser saying Norris let Piastri pass, but the championship let Piastri pass. What is going to be interesting to see though with pole, or the fight for it, is obviously not just who gets pole, but for Lando, it's about who is alongside him or around him on the grid. Because if Lando tomorrow loses the lead into turn one, it really does matter who the person is who takes the lead. If it's his teammate and Lando remains in second, then Piastri's going to have to let Lando through, isn't he? At some point. If Leclerc passes Lando on the first lap from the front row, then obviously Leclerc doesn't have to. And, at that point, you'd probably say Leclerc favourite to win. So whoever lines up alongside Lando, if, of course, Lando takes pole, is also very important. And if you're a Leclerc or a Piastri and you still have designs on maybe competing for the championship, then, yeah, you need to make sure you're second at minimum. Because, of the record Lando has at losing the lead on the first lap. As all the cars... Is it all the cars? Yeah, pretty much all the cars lined up at the exit of the pit lane. And Q3 has begun. The final 12 minutes of qualifying. And this is one of the best, say, showdowns we get year in, year out for qualifying is here in Singapore. Monaco is obviously still the best, but this is right up there, no doubt about it. A track where you get to see who the true elite are and who will prove to be that in this session. And again, if you get pole, chances are you will go on to victory. So it is so crucial here. As I'll get the timer on screen, guys, in about 10 seconds. As the crowd waiting in anticipation of something special. And interestingly, the two Ferraris are the last in the pack. And what that means is they will have the more, say, track grip available. Because obviously as the session goes on, the more rubber that's laid down, the grippier the track becomes. Ferrari will have a bit more grip than, say, McLaren will have. Because, Oscar Piastri is already halfway round his lap. So that really could benefit Ferrari if they nail their first laps here. And of course, these first laps in Q3, they are very important because you never know what can happen on the second lap. There could be a yellow flag, red flag. Sometimes you can get pole with even just your first lap. Sebastian Vettel did that here in 2013, I remember, where he did a pole lap that wasn't even as good as he could have done. He was actually pretty conservative on that pole lap because back then, when you were in Q3, the lap you did your tyres on, you had to start on those tyres for the race. So, yeah, it just shows you how dominant Seb was that weekend. But here is Oscar Piastri, man at the moment, at this current moment in Formula One. But what can he do here in Singapore? For him, considering how much slower he's been than teammate Norris, he needs to aim for the front row. And if he can get that, you never know, another race win could be on the cards. First sector looks good. Max Verstappen, though, goes a tenth of a second quicker behind. But again, the first sector is not as important as the other two sectors, as Piastri having quite a wiggle out of turn, I think 8 that was, or turn 9. Now into the hairpin. Lando Norris now doing a purple first sector. As Piastri's middle sector is good, but it's not pole position good. Put it that way. What's Verstappen doing behind compared to him? Way quicker. This is a brilliant lap by Max. He's 4 tenths up on Piastri in the middle sector. As Hulkenberg does the first time. Hold on, let me actually get the order up. Hulkenberg up to P1 and on a Ferrari in the barrier. Carlos Sainz in the final corner has put it in the barrier as Max Verstappen, right before the red flag, goes quickest ahead of Piastri. And Sainz, he had not even started the lap. That was him coming out of the final corner, and clearly he's lit the rear tyres up and gone bang into the barriers. Let me hide the timer quickly, as we have a red flag with 8 minutes and 4 seconds remaining in Q3. Absolute disaster for Ferrari, because obviously for their Constructors' Championship, they now have got Sainz out of Q3 and he's going to be starting P10 at best. Sainz needs to just get out the car. I don't know why he's still on the car, to be honest. And he does progressively get out of the car. And he is out. This time last year, he was the king of Singapore. Now he is the idiot of Singapore. So yeah, he let through a car there, went through the final corner, and rear tyres clearly weren't up to temperature properly. And he had a proper tank slapper, spun, and then rear end went right into the final corner. That barrier, though, doesn't look too damaged to me. So this delay should not be massively long. Just need to get the car cleared. And then should be, after that, pretty much good to go. But with 8 minutes to go, once the session gets back underway again, it does make things interesting, because what do the drivers do? Do they go out and still do a first attempt, the ones that haven't done one yet? As Verstappen has had his time deleted, because I think he set it right after the red flag. Or, yeah, it would have been right after the red flag came out. But yeah, for the other drivers, Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Russell, Tsunoda, Alonso, be interesting to see with those drivers when they decide to do their first run and whether it's their final run in qualifying. Because with 8 minutes to go, if you go out and do a run, by the time they come back into the pits, there'll be, 4 minutes to go? Would they be able to get fueled up in time to go out again and do another run? Probably, but it would be cutting it close. But at the minute, Oscar Piastri is quickest on a 1 minute 30.3, which I have to say is a pretty bad lap time in terms of fighting for pole. I don't know if he had to back off a lot in the final corner. I don't think he did, because I'm pretty sure Sainz had let him through. So, yeah, that's a pretty bad time from Piastri, but nonetheless, For now, he's on pole. And we wait for the restart of the session. I'll let you guys know when that is. Again, it shouldn't be a massive delay. But what I will do, whilst we've got this red flag, is finish up the results of the poll in the chat. And thank you guys for voting. Been great to see you interacting, as many of you interacting as possible with the poll. As Carlos Sainz slowly trudges back to his Ferrari garage. So yeah, 407 votes in the poll, where I asked you guys, who do you think will take pole for the 2024 Singapore Grand Prix? And 49% of you have gone for Lando Norris. 29% in second have gone for Charles Leclerc. 15% for Oscar Piastri and 5% for Carlos Sainz. Well, now we know he's not going to get pole because he's crashed. But I agree. I think Lando Norris will take pole, as they're showing another replay of... and yeah, Piastri had set that time before Carlos had even crashed. Yanni says Sainz caused last week's accident after he passed Perez. Instead of closing the door on Perez, he immediately went after Charles's position. When he couldn't make the move, he went after Perez. I still think that incident is more of a 50-50. Yeah, you could put some blame here on Carlos, but I don't think it's like a slam dunk, to be honest. Looney Classic says Max did not slow down for double waved yellow flags. So he might have to go see the stewards. It was very tight in terms of when those yellows were. So yeah, there'll need to be and Max just asked why was his lap time deleted, and Red Bull said they'll have a look back to see if he did actually complete the lap before the red flag actually came out. But yeah, the barrier, to me, it looks. I mean, there's slight bits on like the front of it that is ripped off, but I don't see that it's like massively damaged. I don't think. But yeah, I'll let you guys know when the I'll let you guys know when the red flag is over and done with, as they've got a track sweeper out there, have they? And yeah, they're just trying to, I guess, to push the barrier back into place. Jazztastic says Lando will take pole, then get overtaken tomorrow in the race in the first lap. If that happens again, then I just give up with the guy at that point. This record, it has to come to an end. It has to. And surely this weekend has got to be that weekend. But yeah. Yeah, they're just pushing the barrier back into place. And some slight sweeping going on. And yeah, we'll wait to see. when the session gets back underway. Linear Classic says Max got a penalty in Qatar 2021 for something similar when Bottas stopped on the start-finish straight. I can't remember that incident, to be honest, because I don't even think I watched qualifying for that particular weekend, so yeah, I can't remember honestly that weekend whether that did indeed happen. But Yanni says Carlos has crazy eyes. Just look at his face. Go on, do it now. He's unstable. Lol. Well, obviously, it's from having the crash, and would have been a big shock to the system because obviously it's not a crash you expect. But yeah, clearly didn't have his tires up to temperature. That's what I think it was. That's a classic rear tires just too cold, and he spun. That's what I think it is. But doesn't matter anymore because he's out and he's in P10 and he will start in P10. May have to take a gearbox penalty because he did go rear end in first. So if he takes a gearbox penalty, that means Alex Albon will start in P10. But yeah, look, they just showed Verstappen's the end of his lap, and I don't know if the green light was flashing when he crossed the line. So I think Red Bull have got a legitimate, thing to argue there because the light was green when he crossed the line, I think. And yeah, Verstappen saying on the radio there, replay of the radio, him saying that he lifted as Verstappen there in the garage waiting to get out as all the rest are, but we still have a red flag. No communication from the race control yet as to when we're going to be getting underway. But, well, they've took the red flag away now, so I'd say we're probably 2 or 3 minutes away from a restart here. And, with the red flag, obviously it's common in Singapore in qualifying. At least it's happened at the start of Q3, not, at the very end. There you go. Q3 will resume in 3 minutes' time. So 3 minutes' time, and it's 8 minutes and 4 seconds left on the clock. And I will sync up the timer at the 8-minute mark when we get to it. And then, we'll see who decides to come out straight away. I'm not sure everyone will come out straight away, I must say. Sarah Gara's Q3 already happened. No. We are currently under red flag conditions. We're about to get back underway. And, we've got 8 minutes and 4 seconds left on the clock. So, no, we haven't really got even Q3 started. But yeah, we'll wait to see when we get underway what happens in terms of who decides to come out. Again, no guarantee that everyone is going to pile onto the track as soon as we get underway here, because again, with 8 minutes to go, if you do go out to do a run now, it's going to be tight in terms of being able to get out and do a second run at the end of Q3. So I think what we could see here when the session gets underway, which I think is in another, I don't know, 40 seconds or so, I think. Um, yeah, what we could see is the session restart and no one come back out on track for another 4 minutes. And if that does happen, it's understandable, but one thing it does do is it puts a lot of pressure on the drivers to deliver with that final lap. As all the fans are in the grandstand, lots of Lando Norris fans. Obviously, lots of McLaren fans as well. And Lando obviously finished second at this race last year, right behind Carlos Sainz. As there you go, the session has begun, but I've missed the sync up point. Sorry about that. I'll sync it up at the 7 minute mark. But yeah, no cars coming out on track. So what I think is going to happen is they're all going to come out for one final run. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. See who can deliver in that very high pressurized environment. Because at least with Q3, the good thing is you obviously got a couple goes at it, to get pole. But one opportunity is, yeah, that's a lot of pressure. As Red Bull look like they're just slowly getting ready. Still no tyres on the Red Bull of Verstappen. But currently, Piastri in P1, and if there is another red flag right at the end that prevents everyone else from doing a lap, then it'll be Piastri and Hulkenberg on the front row, and obviously Piastri will go on to win the race if that is the case. And Carlos Sainz has been noted for crossing the track on foot. He'll probably get a fine for that, but who cares? It was safe enough for him to do it. Saves him having to go all the way around. But, the FIA love their protocols and all that rubbish. There is Gianpiero Lambiase, Max Verstappen's engineer, and also I think head of is it head of engineering now at Red Bull? He's been given a new position at Red Bull, but he still is Max's engineer. He's got a lot of responsibilities now as Lambiase. As there is a big Charles Leclerc fan. And plenty of Ferrari fans around as well. And yeah, Ferrari, as I've said before, very successful in Singapore. They've taken 5 pole positions here in the last 10 years. And they've won here as well. I think in 3 of the last 10 years they've got 3 race wins in the last 10 years here in Singapore. And probably should have had a couple more. Super Kev, got to read this out. Says, don't let the red flag distract you from the fact that in Springfield they're eating the dogs and eating the cats. Indeed. Lots of dogs and cats being eaten in Springfield, guys. Don't know if you know, breaking news, but apparently it's going on. Of course, it's bullshit. It's not going on. It's just a load of rubbish. Some fucking weird ass rumor that someone started, and now some reason people believe it. Anyway, enough of Springfield, as we've now got cars on track. And it is Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, the first two cars on the circuit. And for Lando Norris, who has admitted that he does suffer with lots of anxiety before the race and before qualifying, this is as high pressured as it gets. And a lot of the times in the last few weeks and months, he has not delivered in those high pressure moments. What will he deliver in these final 3 minutes? Because he must get pole position. There is no way around it. He must get pole. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a massive blow to his World Championship challenge. As we're looking on board at Oscar Piastri, who currently is on provisional pole position with a 1:30.0, which I can tell you now will not be the pole position time. As Sonoda being told on the radio, if the car in front of you plays games, you're allowed to overtake him after the pit exit. As there is Max Verstappen, who is the last car to leave the pit lane. And if he's the last in the pack, of course, as I said earlier, he'll have more grip available to him than Piastri and Norris will, who are at the start of the lap. And the reason McLaren have sent their two cars out first is to make sure, because obviously they trust their two drivers not to crash. They're doing it to make sure they get times on the board before any red flag. But with 2 minutes to go in qualifying, this is what it's all about. As Oscar Piastri begins his first or his final attempt at pole, and Lando Norris, the favourite for pole here, begins his only attempt at a first ever pole in Singapore. And through the first couple corners, looks absolutely brilliant in what is a brilliant McLaren car. Piastri, personal best first sector. Norris looking absolutely on rails through the first few corners. And what is the first sector like? It is 3/4 of a tenth quicker than Piastri. As Russell's been told on the team radio not to let Verstappen through, interestingly. As Piastri, coming up to the middle sector point, has improved on his own personal best by 3.5 tenths, but I'm not sure this lap time from Piastri is worthy of pole position. We'll see, though, for Lando Norris, what his middle sector time is like. It is a purple middle sector, 4 tenths up on Piastri, but it's still going to be close to the two McLaren drivers. Piastri to the line, only improves by 0.08 of a second, 1:29.9. Piastri is done. That definitely won't be pole for Piastri. Here comes Norris through the final corner, and Lando Norris, a 1:29.5. He is on provisional pole, but that could be beaten. As Leclerc has done a personal best first sector. Hulkenberg, he is finished up. Currently in third. Of course, he'll drop down later on, you would imagine. But he only went a 1/10.5 slower than Piastri. Great effort by him. Leclerc Nearly half a second down on Norris after the first 2 sectors. Where's the pace gone for Leclerc here? As Lewis Hamilton looking better after the first 2 sectors. Alonso goes 4th. So Hulkenberg out-qualifies Alonso. Verstappen not doing great sectors, but still close enough to Norris, as Leclerc only goes 4th behind Hulkenberg. A disaster for Leclerc. Here's Lewis Hamilton. Onto the front row for Lewis Hamilton with a purple final sector. Here comes Max Verstappen. What can he do? He's on the front row, crucial for his championship. 2/10 off Norris as Russell goes 4th. Tsunoda goes 8th. Leclerc's had his time deleted. Even worse for Ferrari. Ferrari have ended up 9th and 10th. A shocker for the Scuderia, but ultimately Lando Norris provided the goods when it mattered. But he will be a bit disappointed to find out that it is Max Verstappen alongside him on the front row. What an effort by Max Verstappen. That was a world champion's lap from Verstappen to get himself on the front row. And if he gets that better start tomorrow than Lando, we all know how that's going to turn out. But there you go. So Lando Norris will be on pole for the Singapore Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, his championship rival, who obviously Norris 59 points behind. Verstappen, crucially, in second. Lewis Hamilton, third. Brilliant effort by him. His first great qualifying in a few races. George Russell, fourth. Great day for Mercedes-Benz. Oscar Piastri, fifth. Piastri just didn't do a good lap in Q3 at all, whether it was the first attempt or the second attempt. They were both poor in the end. Hulkenberg, sixth for Haas. What an effort. Third row for the Haas team. Alonso, seventh. Tsunoda, eighth. Leclerc, ninth. And Sainz in 10th. Ferrari will be bitterly disappointed when they really could have been right up there, maybe even fighting Lando for pole. Leclerc just produced a poor lap at the end and then had it deleted. And then Albon 11th, Colapinto 12th, Perez 13th, Magnussen 14th, Ocon 15th, Ricciardo 16th, Stroll 17th, Gasly 18th, Bottas 19th, and Zhou in 20th. That is your grid for tomorrow's Singapore Grand Prix. Wow. And let's get into, quickly, in this quick reaction to qualifying, let's get into who your driver of the day is for qualifying in Singapore. And Todd saying there in the chat exactly what I was thinking. Turn 1 and 2 going to be interesting tomorrow. Absolutely. But your options for driver of the day are Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Nico Hulkenberg. Personally, I am going for Nico Hulkenberg as my driver of the day, because he, produced a lap that, wasn't expected in terms of where he ended up. Obviously, Verstappen on the front row, we didn't predict that to happen, but when you consider the context that both Ferraris didn't do a lap and Piastri did a poor lap, Max in the end only needed to out-qualify the two Mercedes to end up on the front row, which is something I thought was going to happen anyway. So Max was a bit fortunate to get, where he ended up on the end, in the end, but still produced the goods when it mattered. But yeah, I would go Nico Hulkenberg. But out of the top three drivers, I would probably say Max Verstappen was the best performer of those top three. But I would go Hulkenberg driver of the day. That was a superb effort from the German. And Nib, who's of course watching from afar this qualifying session, has just let me know that Piastri obviously did a poor effort in Q3, but if Piastri had done his Q2 time in Q3, Piastri would have been on the front row. So yeah, Piastri, that just emphasizes how poor that that Q3 was. But there is a race tomorrow, and McLaren, as we know, will have a quick car. But let's get some quick reaction for a few minutes from you guys in the chat. Astro says, didn't see that coming. Jastastic says, an interesting lineup. Having the toss to the world champs lap from Leclerc. Yeah, I mean, even if he didn't have his lap time deleted, that lap was poor. He ended up behind Hulkenberg when he completed it. So it was only going to be 7th at best. Yanni says, Pole's first corner will be the only clear track he'll see all race tomorrow. Ha ha ha. Well, not sure who you're talking about there. You talking about Lando? Max? Not sure. But I cannot wait for the first lap tomorrow, because simply put, if Max Verstappen passes Lando Norris into turn 1, then unless Red Bull are really slow in the race or they mess up their strategy, Max Verstappen should win the Singapore Grand Prix. And if he does win the Singapore Grand Prix, then as far as I'm concerned, the championship is over. Because with 6 races to go, Lando would have to actually perform at the level of a Max Verstappen to win the championship. But we know, obviously, this season that Lando hasn't really been doing that. So, still, Lando tomorrow has got to win the race. And then, if Verstappen finishes second, so be it. If Verstappen finishes any lower, great. But for Lando, just make sure, obviously, you get the start right, but make sure you lead, the first lap comfortably and then win the race, because he has to win this race no matter what. If Lando Norris does not win this race and Max Verstappen somehow does, like I said, it is game over in the championship. Laurie Rostoki says, I think Max is winning this championship anyway. Piastri and Leclerc will continue to challenge Lando. Never mind Max. Astro says Norris will win, I think. Laurie also says shocked Max finished P2 even when he hasn't got the fastest car he delivers. Todd says the Red Bull looked good on long runs. I mean, they weren't the quickest on the long runs, but they weren't. Yeah, they were decent. But I think looking at the long runs, if Max, as long as he doesn't have like what he had in Baku, which was like really bad handling to the point where his pace is like horrifically bad, which is what we saw in Baku, and even to a degree what we saw in Monza as well. Then, like I said, if Verstappen passes Norris into turn 1, he should be able to hang on to the lead and win the race. But let's let's wait and see what happens. That first corner is going to decide the race tomorrow and might even decide the World Championship. Rook says Colapinto continues to impress indeed. Another brilliant performance by him. Astro says Max has a whopping lead. That's going to be very hard to beat anyhow. I don't think we'd get a title fight. I don't think we really will or have now. I still think we can have a title fight. If Lando wins tomorrow and Max finishes second, I mean, the gap still goes down to 52 points. And with 10 races to go, or not 10, why did I say 10 races to go? 6 races to go after this one. He could still cut down that gap, Lando, from 52 points to obviously, points in his favour. It's just, again, it's just whether Lando tomorrow, will he actually deliver? Because the pressure, was on there, obviously, for him to get pole, and he did. So well done to Lando. He did the job that he was expected to do, did it well. But he has said before how nervous he gets before the start of races. And surely he's going to be even more nervous knowing that if he especially fucks up tomorrow, then Max will be ahead of him and he'll basically, his championship will be over. So it all comes down to the first corner. Looney Classic says Lewis is in third is a threat to Max 2 on the start. I mean, he's a threat to anyone on the front row, but our main focus will be Lando and Max, obviously, on the first corner. But I think, guys, I'll bring things to an end because I think we've got a clear winner in the poll, where I asked you guys who is driver of the day for qualifying in Singapore. 23 votes, and 30% of you went for Max Verstappen. 26% went for Lewis Hamilton and Nico Hülkenberg. And then 17% of you went for Lando Norris. Thank you guys for voting, and thank you guys for coming along to this qualifying watch along. And remember, I won't be doing a race watch along tomorrow because personally I don't think the race tomorrow is going to be that great. It's all going to come down to the first corner, and I don't want to stream just to watch out what's going to happen at turn 1. That's not exactly exciting for me. So yeah, I won't be live tomorrow, but on Monday I will be uploading, of course, the 9th episode of my podcast, where I will review the Grand Prix from Singapore and whatever goes down in that Grand Prix. So yeah, thank you guys for coming along to this qualifying watch along. The next live stream I'm going to do will be qualifying day for the US Grand Prix, which will be in a month from now on the 19th of October, I think it will be. So yeah, going to be quite a while till then. But as I said earlier, guys, there is content coming between now and then. Maybe a couple videos in the 4-week break we're going to have between Singapore and the US Grand Prix. Definitely one video. So yeah, there is content coming. Don't worry about that. But thank you guys massively for coming along to this stream. Thanks for subbing if you have, smashing the like button if you have. Been absolutely fantastic if you've done all of that stuff. And yeah, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Smash the like button if you did enjoy this stream. Make sure to join our Discord server, link below in the description and in the chat if you want to join our growing community. And if you want to, if you want to have a place where you can get good notifications as to content plans and when I go live and upload videos, the Discord server is a great place to be. But guys, thank you for today. And until my podcast reviewing whatever craziness maybe happens tomorrow in Singapore, which again, that podcast will be uploaded on Monday. Until then, guys, it's been me, Chazzer HD. Goodbye.